Firstly was how they targeted their chosen demographic. It aired on free TV. This meant that anyone flicking through the channels could stumble across it and watch it instead of specifically going out of their way to pay $30 for the pay-per-view. Secondly, it aired on Spike TV. If you don't know what Spike TV was, it was basically the lads channel. They had the 18 to 34 male demographic nailed down. The show aired on Monday nights directly after WWE Raw, and ultimately the decision to broadcast on this channel at this time turned out to be one of the key factors behind the success of the show. But it wasn't the only one. Developing emotional connections. The Ultimate Fighter's key purpose was to educate potential new fans about the sport of MMA. They could have done this through documentary, but they chose to do this through reality TV. However, in doing so, they still took elements from documentary when telling their stories. The biggest example of this would be the sit-down interview. The direct address interview shows emotional intimacy, sympathy for the speaker, a sense of their interiority, what John Dovey calls the first-person media effect, a theory that can be linked to immediacy because of the realistic feeling that the audience feels through the interview. An example of this working in full effect would be when Chris Lieben had an altercation with Josh Koscheck and Bobby Southworth in Season 1. Lieben decided to sleep outside by himself in his sleeping bag. Koscheck and Southworth came out and sprayed him with a hose, and as an emotional, teary Chris Lieben loses his temper and shows how upset he is, a smug Koscheck says in his sit-down interview,
"I'm an instigator, and I instigated it, and when you have a few cocktails, of course you want to see how far you can push somebody to see what they're going to do next."
That little dickhead. But that's the point. Whether it makes the viewer angry because they see an arrogant young man bullying Chris Lieben, or they find it funny that someone has caused Chris Lieben to lose his temper and lash out, the viewer now either loves or hates Josh Koscheck. An emotional connection has been established between the viewer and the fighter they're watching. They now have a reason to want to watch these two men fight and see out the conclusion of their story. This formula is something that carried the viewers from week to week and contributed massively to the success of the show. Casting. There's a clip from the start of Season 1 where Dana White addresses his fighters, and he says,
"We picked who we believe are the best guys in this country right now. We did. And you guys are it."
Well, that's a lie. In amongst the Season 1 cast was a man called Jason Tacker. Would you like to know how many fights Jason Tacker has had at this point in his career? 0. None. Not one. In 2005, I had the same MMA record that Jason Tacker had, and I was 6! This man had the same MMA record as a 6-year-old. Even today, 17 years later, he has never won a fight. How can this man be the best in the country when he's clearly not the best, and he's not even in the country? But that's the point. There were many legitimate prospects on the show, from Mike Swick to Kenny Florian to Nate Quarry, but fighting ability wasn't the only thing taken into account when casting who should be on the show. While Chris Lieben, Josh Koscheck and Forrest Griffin were all excellent fighters, they also covered the personality side of the show to ensure that the cast were entertaining as well as talented. Jason Tacker, however, is the most obvious example, with Tacker himself even hearing producers choose him over Jason McDonald, a legitimate MMA prospect, because McDonald had a boring personality. Manufacturing conflict. Another factor behind the success of The Ultimate Fighter was the producer's ability to manufacture conflict. While the show wasn't scripted, like many reality shows, the producers of The Ultimate Fighter used a number of different methods to generate conflict. This included splitting the fighters into teams and having them compete in challenges outside of their usual fights, cutting off their communication to the outside world, and offering them free alcohol to drink in the house whenever they wanted. This resulted in a consistent stream of altercations and incidents that made the viewer want to keep watching. Finally, the payoff. After months of building towards it, the final fight aired on the 9th of April 2005. It featured Forrest Griffin taking on Stephan Bonnar, and while this isn't something that can be scripted, the fight ended up being regarded even to this day as arguably the greatest fight to ever take place in the UFC. Both men were evenly matched, both had an exciting style, and both men now had the platform to showcase to new fans what the UFC consists of. And in the end, both men were given contracts despite only one contract being promised to the winner because the fight was that good. The fight was seen by 2.6 million viewers, and it launched the UFC into the mainstream.